Welcome back, viewers. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is in Indonesia on the first leg of his three-nation tour, and this visit is aimed to further strengthen India's Act East policy, Mahasagar vision, and also its commitment to a free, open and inclusive Indo-Pacific. In a special gesture, Prime Minister Modi was also received at the airport by Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto. In addition, 4 ministers were present to receive the Prime Minister, who was accorded a traditional ceremonial welcome and a guard of honor as well. Times Now also spoke to the Indian ambassador to Indonesia, Sandeep Chakraborty, who stressed on the fact that India and Indonesia are two powers in the Indo-Pacific and the engagement fulfills India's Act East policy. Watch this exclusive interview.
Ambassador Chakraborty, thank you so much for joining in on Times Now. As Prime Minister Modi arrives in Jakarta, remember he's also said that this is a bilateral relationship which is now no more a traditional strategic partnership, but it is one that is now turning into a knowledge partnership. Could you help us understand why he says so?
Well, you see, when Prime Minister Modi came in 2018, we had elevated the strategic partnership into comprehensive strategic partnership. And a great deal of impetus was given when President Prabowo came to India last year as Chief Guest of the Republic Day. Since then, on several dimensions, the relationship has been moving, whether it is in education, whether it is in DPI, whether it is in defense, or whether it is in pharmaceuticals, health sector cooperation. So I think what Prime Minister is referring to is that systems and models that have succeeded in India at a population scale, the attempt has been to replicate in after modification in Indonesia. So Prime Minister is referring to that as the knowledge partnership.
Right. Ambassador, defense and maritime, defense manufacturing, tech transfer, maritime cooperation is also on the agenda. Given India's Atmanirbhar push, what are the 2 to 3 priority areas where India and Indonesia can build long-term defense collaboration?
Well, Atmanirbhar Bharat, I think, can very well synergize with self-reliant Indonesia. As you know, Indonesia is a country with rich resources, and for last several decades, it has powered the Indian economy. The Indonesian government has now implemented a policy known as downstreaming, which is basically value addition in Indonesia. So Indian enterprise has been very, very agile, and they have adapted to that. And during the Prime Minister's visit, you will find several announcements where Indian enterprise will invest in Indonesia, process materials in Indonesia, and then use it for the Indian and the global market. I think there is a lot of possibility, and this will be the beginning of new areas of cooperation between India and Indonesia. Talking about the defense and maritime field, I think the Indian defense industry is now coming of age. We are exporting globally, and there is no reason why Indian systems will not find a market in Indonesia, and there may be some announcements in this regard as well.
Very interesting, given the timing of, what we've seen happen in West Asia, especially the disturbances. Prime Minister, before, just ahead of his three-nation tour, has in fact gone on to talk about how his visits are going to also align with India's Act East policy, the Mahasagar vision. So, which is why I want to quickly bring you in on Indo-Pacific and the ASEAN role. Indonesia wants to move from being a consumer to an exporter of digital solutions. Also, how Prime Minister is now ensuring to bring back focus on the Indo-Pacific, given that we've seen the U.S. administration's interest it's in fact declining as far as the Quad is concerned. So what is the role that India and Indonesia can play?
I believe that India and Indonesia are the two major powers in the Indo-Pacific. In fact, Indonesia is truly an Indo-Pacific power. Its territory extends from the Indian Ocean, from the Andaman Sea to the Pacific. So engagement with Indonesia is actually towards fulfillment of India's Act East policy and the Indo-Pacific strategy of India. Similarly, through ASEAN, Indonesia participates in the ASEAN outlook on Indo-Pacific. So I am very convinced that Prime Minister's visit will enlarge our areas of cooperation, whether it is maritime security, whether it is HADR, rescue at sea, marine pollution, illegal and unregulated fishing, and also new areas of cooperation. We have a robust space cooperation with Indonesia. We are now looking at nuclear cooperation. So I believe that it's a very comprehensive relationship. And as India looks east, or rather acts east, I think most of the action or large part of the action will be in Indonesia because of the size of the economy, because of the size of the population. That Indonesia is also a democratic a country like India. In fact, one of the highlights of Prime Minister's visit will be his address to the Parliament of Indonesia.
Given India's push under Prime Minister Modi for clean energy, here in India, there's a lot of chatter about nickel diplomacy, given Indonesia is one of the largest traders in nickel and its role, especially when it comes to EVs and batteries. How do you think India and Indonesia can forge partnership in this area?
Well, you see, nickel is an important critical mineral which is available abundantly in Indonesia. Several Indian enterprises have ventured into this sector, and you will be happy to know that we are going to sign an MOU for establishment of a nickel processing plant, which will be used to make stainless steel slab. As you know, India is a large manufacturer of stainless steel, and the growth of stainless steel demand in India is growing, but we don't have nickel. So our companies have got together, and there will be an announcement for that as well. In addition, India needs rare earth magnets, and you will find an announcement to this effect also, where India, which has light rare earths, and Indonesia has heavy rare earths, and these two will combine for an enterprising solution to our problems.
My last question, Ambassador Chakraborty, you mentioned people-to-people ties, one that are extremely ancient, civilizational in nature when it comes to India and Indonesia, whether it is Mahabharata or Ramayana. Shed light on Prime Minister's visit and his outreach to the diaspora community there. You also mentioned Prime Minister would be making an address in the Parliament. What can we expect on that front?
Yes, you're very right. I think Prime Minister has many opportunities, or has agreed to many opportunities to directly deal with the community and the Parliament, and then also travel to Prambanan Temple. I think the Prambanan Temple in many ways symbolizes the close cultural, historical ties with India, and its restoration is a modern, contemporary example of how countries can work together to keep their shared cultural heritage alive. He will, of course, be addressing the small but very vibrant and dynamic Indian community in Indonesia. And of course, in his address to the Parliament, he will give his vision for in the Indo-Pacific and the new world order that is emerging. So, in all, a very comprehensive visit, a very short visit, but a visit that ticks all the boxes. And Prime Minister has a very hectic agenda, and we are looking forward to welcoming him in Jakarta later today.
Absolutely, and that's exactly how a comprehensive strategic partnership looks like. It's interesting that Indonesia is going to be the first stop for Prime Minister on this three-nation tour. It's been a pleasure having you here on Times Now. Thank you so much, Ambassador Chakraborty.
Thank you very much.